Tell Me What to Read is recorded on the lands of the Wongal people, and we pay our respects to all elders past and present, and extend our welcome to any First Nations people listening today. This is Tell Me What to Read, brought to you by Booktopia. I'm your host, Nick Wasiliev, and welcome to the show where we chat about the next great books you should be reading with the authors behind them and familiar faces who read them. All books mentioned in today's show can be found right now at booktopia.com.au, and the links can be found in the description. This is Tell Me What to Read, powered by Booktopia. I'm Nick Wasiliev, and today I am back here in Booktopia's studio on unceded Wongal country, and I pay my respects to all elders past and present and extend that to any First Nations people listening today. And today I am joined by the one and only Osher Günsberg. He's one of the most recognisable faces on Australian television. He's hosted The Bachelor, The Bachelorette, Australian Idol, Masked Singer. The list goes on. It's a massive list. He's also hosts multiple podcasts, including Dad Pod with Charlie Clausen and Better Than Yesterday, which we're going to talk about a little bit as well. And today he's also going to talk to us about the world of TV, the books he's reading and enjoying, everything in between. Osher, welcome to the show.
Hey, I'm so grateful to be here. Thanks for having me a part of it. I'm happy that you only mentioned the shows that didn't get cancelled. So that's nice. I appreciate that. Back before Twitter, cancelled meant that your show doesn't come back on air. Not that you're not allowed to say anything ever again, even if I have learned my lesson. I'm sorry. That we don't care. You can never speak again. Like, no one's allowed to learn lessons. We have to be able to be mad at you forever. I'm not a fan of cancel culture.
It's the never-ending cycle of the internet. It will never ever end.
Don't get me wrong. I think people should be accountable for their actions, but people also need the room to learn, and we would want that for us and our loved ones. So why do we not give that to others? Just opening the batting strong.
I like it. You come out like swinging. It's like Dave Warner on the first or second ball, changing his stance and just immediately going for the slot.
Keep it guessing, bro.
Keep it guessing. So you're a TV host, podcaster. You do everything, man. Like you do photography. You're a coffee connoisseur. How often do you get the chance to read?
I read every day. It's not my joke. It's James Matheson's joke. I read sometimes 4 books a day. They're 28 pages long, and they're probably at a total of 250 words. No, I do. I read every day. Not only do I just adore reading books to Wolfie, who's 3 now, as much as I used to adore reading books to G before she went, I'm all right without a story tonight. And that was the night before. We didn't know it was the last time we'd ever read to her. She was about 11, I think, 12.
Oh, that's heartbreaking.
It is. You never, and this is the thing, Stav, who I used to work with in Brisbane, he said, you don't realize, and you'll never know the last time you ever pick up your child. You put them down after carrying them, and that will have been the last time you've ever picked them up, and you won't know. So it's along those lines where you just have to cherish every single time you read a book to your kids, or those moments, like one day they don't want it anymore, and that'll have already happened. And so it's really important. But yeah, I do. I read every day, and it varies. I went through a phase of just reading dystopian science fiction every night, which I really enjoyed, which is wild considering me and my history. But that was really good. And now I'm kind of back in the nonfiction world. But I read before bed. I find it quite a good way to be in the glide path to sleep.
Oh, that's glorious. You always appreciate it's the nice way to chill out before you go to sleep. Just like put yourself into that reading space, read a couple of chapters.
You're reading, man.
Yeah, true. Actually, yeah, that's true.
Certainly in the nonfiction world.
So on the subject of books, of course, we've got to talk about your 2020 memoir that came out back after the break.
Yes.
Yes, you've got a book out yourself. And for listeners, I'll include it in the description. I got the chance to skim over it a bit before coming here to chat with you, and you unveil a lot in this book, man.
Yeah, I do. Well, it's a memoir, Well, I wrote it. I was 44 when I wrote it, so it's kind of more of a half-time report than a memoir, I guess. But it's important. I felt it was. I got told, to be honest. I got told. I was sharing my story kind of behind closed doors as part of my role with being on the board at Sane Australia, which is Australia's oldest mental health advocacy and assistance charity. And I was doing an event with those guys, maybe only 20 people in some boardroom somewhere. And Alan Sparks, the extraordinary advocate for mental health in the first responders and police forces, he just put his hand on my shoulder. And like, he's old school 6'4" kind of cop, guy. Even though he's retired, he's still got the big house brick hands. He put his hand on my shoulder and says, "You got no business not writing a book about this. You've got no business not telling other people. You should share this." Okay, Alan. And that's kind of how it started. And I just wanted to give people what I was given that helped me get better. Because when in my experience, I'm sober now, and I've also been through a period of extraordinarily traumatic mental ill health. I'm doing a lot better these days. But what happens when you're in those situations? Your brain tries to convince you that there's no other way there could ever be, and you can't actually conceive of it being any different. You cannot think your way out of the hole your brain's dug itself into, and the only thing that can get you out of that is to see and hear stories of other people who have been where you were and are now where you want to go, and just trust that if you do what they tell you, you'll get there. And so all I wanted to do was just give people what was given to me, which is kind of why I went deep in that book, and I'm really grateful I did.
Yeah, because it seemed it was kind of. It took me a little bit. I had to do a double take when I was reading it a couple of times, because it was at odds with the Osher on TV and the Osher was dealing with stuff behind the scenes.
Well, you never know what you're looking at, all right? And people have, and I think that's the sort of kind of secret power that I have, is when people think of someone who's a recovering alcoholic, they don't think of me counting flowers on the telly. When they think of someone who's experiencing episodes of, psychosis that manifested paranoid delusion and dealing with suicidality, they don't think of me. They probably think of someone on a bus screaming at someone who's not there. But look, there I was on your TV saying, "Good morning, ladies." And that's what I was dealing with at the time. And I think it's important that we realize there's a lot of people in our community going through a lot of stuff, and many people can, and with treatment, that's the other thing, I guess, with treatment and taking your diagnosis seriously and taking your treatment seriously and taking your meds properly and doing what your doctors tell you and doing the work every day, a great life is yours. And I think that's why, that's why it was important for me to do that.
Is that what the book, like, because I always often like to speak to writers or, whoever, when they're writing something and committing something to the page, and they often find that the writing process actually taught them something much more than they did previously. Do you think, did the book kind of help you with that when you were in that space, or try to kind of look back at that space in a new way? And I mean, I'm glad to hear first and foremost that you're a lot happier these days.
Well, it comes with work, it doesn't. As I like to, when I do a lot of speaking on this. So people, go to people's workplaces and talk to them about. Lately I'm speaking a lot more about mental health in the workplace, because I've gone through all this since 2001. I was on TV when this stuff started to happen, and so it's important to show people that what a supportive workplace and what utilizing the resources that workplaces have on offer can do. So when I speak, I talk about medication, because I, like many Australian men, I thought self-medication was just going to be just fine. It wasn't. Alcohol turned out not to be the best solution. But taking the meds alone doesn't make it better. The way I like to speak about it is there's a cycle race called the Tour de France. Have you heard of it?
Oh, might have. Sounds familiar.
There was a fairly high-profile person that won it a bunch of times back to back. American name. Yes. Lance Armstrong was his name. He took a heap of EPO. All right, that's a drug that helps enhances performance. You can take all the EPO you want, but Lance Armstrong still has to pedal his ass off up the Wes if he wants to win the stage, which he did and does. And if you see the footage, like, he's working hard. The drugs just made it easier to get faster and further than everybody else. And that's the same with taking, drugs for a period of mental ill health or, an ongoing treatment of that. You can take the drugs, but they don't do the work. You have to do the work. The drugs just make it easier.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned that you work with Sane Australia, and I did want to ask a little bit more about that because obviously you've been in this space for a little while. Where do you think we sit on the topic of mental illness right now, just as a society in general? Do you think we've gone forwards? Do you think we've gone backwards? It feels like we've gone forwards.
I'd say we've gone a long way. We've gone a really long way, and we still have a long way to go. In the words of Hans Rosling, who wrote a brilliant book called Factfulness, things are bad, but they're getting better. And it's a beautiful way to look at the world and a beautiful way to look at the situation you're in. Fantastic book, by the way. You got to get onto that. That book will change your day.
I'll include it in the description.
Oh man, it's really good. That and Humankind from Rutger Bregman.
Oh yeah, that's a great book.
It's a goodie. But the Hans Rosling one is really good. Now, so things are bad, but they're getting better. It's not like in my lifetime, people were still being put in asylums. All right. That doesn't happen in our country anymore. In our lifetime, you couldn't say, my dad's got schizophrenia and still have people think it's fine if they come over to your house to play. But that's changing quite a lot, in quite a big way. And that's really, really good. We do have ways to go, but I think it's really important that we recognize that neurodivergent people have always been a part of our community. Always. It's not like, schizophrenia or bipolar was only showed up recently. No, we just now have names for what this stuff is. And we're able to go, that's what that is, and kind of now treat it in a much better way. But these people have always been in our communities. They've always been in our societies, whether we made them shaman or medicine men or, whatever. They were, always a part of every society.
Yeah. And it's great that we're starting to talk about it a lot more and touch on that a lot more. Let's pivot to podcasts and Dad Pod, first and foremost, with that you do with Charlie. This weekly podcast where you talk about fatherhood. What have been some of the funniest reactions and stories that you've received from people who've come on the show?
Well, firstly, it was books that made us do the podcast because
really,
we've got two kids, but our youngest, so me and Audrey have two kids, but our youngest are the same age, about a month apart. So Charlie's daughter, Iona, and our son, Wolfgang, they're about a month apart. And we just couldn't find any resources for dads like us. The same way that Joe Brum looked at the TV and went, there's no cartoons that show a dad like me. I'm going to make Bandit Healer. Which he did. He was working on Peppa Pig for about 5 years before he made Bluey. And I don't know if you watch Peppa Pig, where the dad's not quite the model of good fatherhood. That's it. That's what he does. So Charlie and I were like, there's nothing for like most of the books we found about fathering were stats and weights and, it was all really kind of very American and really everything is in pounds and it's all about, there's very little about connecting emotionally with your kid. And, you read someone like Steve Biddulph's Raising Boys and like that's kind of towards, the kind of thing that we were hoping to find. And Steve's obviously extraordinarily good, but there's a lot of vacant space in that realm, and there really wasn't anything in the podcast world. Even the other fatherhood podcasts were like, "Oh my god, I've got to go and do this thing with my kid." Blah blah blah. It's just middle-aged white men complaining about being a fucking parent. So we're like, you know what? Let's figure this out. And so that's why we started that. And look, some of the people we've had on, really good. In this most recent season, we've pretty much just gone for professors and doctors because we realized that we actually don't know that much. So it was, while it's fun, hearing great parenting stories from people like, Ed Kavli or Roger Corser or, someone who's a mum, dad, Yumi Steins, it's really good to actually get pros on who are quite enlightening. Let's be frank. It's
Yeah.
really good now.
Yeah, I love it. It's like I've only listened to a couple of episodes, and I mean, I'm not a father yet myself, but it's just nice to see that there's a podcast out there for, a lot of those. There is a bit more of a shift towards, dads wanting to be more caring, nurturing parents, and just being a good parent,
Well,
having something out there.
the evidence is clear and the research is clear. We all want our kids to do better than we did. That's basically it. And the evidence and the research backs up that, a strong kind of fathering figure. Now, bear in mind, the father figure can not be particularly a male person, a cisgender male person. Like, just having that strong parental figure there, and more strong parental figures in a kid's life is probably a better way to put it, is, a precursor to kind of far more emotional stability, better outcomes as far as, education and social ability. And we all want, nobody wants their kid to get arrested when they're 20. Nobody. So how do you help that? How do you do your best to make sure that doesn't happen? And it all starts before the age of 5, and that's really important.
Absolutely. And also, I just want to shout out the artwork. Like, whoever idea it was for you taking the Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome cover and putting your faces on it, whoever did that, give them a raise.
As Reed Parker. We've got it stuck. It's the season 3 artwork, because season 1 was we hacked 3 Men and a Baby. Season 2 we went with Lethal Weapon 2, and the Joe Pesci was the one in the middle, but it was a baby. And they're not holding guns, they're holding baby bottles. And season 3 was like, what's a good number 3 on Mad Max 3? Beyond Thunderdome, Beyond Sleeping In. So there we go. We now at season 4, we kind of, I don't know, we got behind on the artwork. We were too busy trying to find times that we could talk to professors.
You could probably there'd be something out there. You could pull it from you could find, there's plenty of amazing artworks you could pull from, but
so it gets very few kind of non-horror movies get past 3. Right? So anything from 4 on, now you're talking like, Saw or, Scream or, and I don't think that'd be good parenting artwork podcast.
Absolutely. Let's talk Better Than Yesterday as well. At the time of recording, I think it's like 450 episodes or over that now. You're on your way. Congratulations.
Thanks, mate. 10 million. We go with 10 million downloads. We had 10 million, which is not bad for an independent podcast that isn't supported by a website. Like, even the podcast we're on right now is supported by the largest, online book retailer in the country. And, they have mailing lists and they have subscriber lists, and, you're able to push your episodes, as you should, through your database and through your customers and people that, are interested in books through your website. I'm a one-man show, and I have been since the start. And the podcast space is rightly, a company like Booktopia should have a podcast. It's very important that they do. But, you can see like bigger media companies, even television companies, coming into the podcast space and then creating these giant kind of vertical, here's this TV show, here's the podcast about the TV show. Now, on the newspapers and the websites that we own, we are going to write articles that push towards a TV show and push towards the podcast and use pull quotes from the podcast to push. I don't have any of that. All right. Good for them. I don't have any of that. So to get 10 million without any of that is as Joe Biden said to Barack Obama when they signed the Obamacare Act, it was a big fucking deal. Which is one of the best hot mic moments that Joe Biden ever did.
I know. It's a big fucking deal. I'm going to use that just in life in general right now. I love that the idea of this was just the goal of the show was to make guests feel better than they were yesterday, which just was like the sweetest thing ever. Has there ever been a guest that like really took you aback, like with their story or their topic of discussion?
Well, it's to people who are listening. I want the people who are listening to feel better than yesterday.
Yes, that's right. Yes,
that's right. Because that's all I wanted out of the conversations. I was not doing very well when I started the podcast. And if you listen to the earlier episodes, certainly around the end of 2013 or through 2014 and 15, I am going through a lot, all the stuff I wrote about, all the stuff we spoke about earlier. And you can hear it in my voice. And you can hear me searching for those answers when I'm interviewing people. because that's what I wanted. I wanted like someone else's brain using their way of seeing the world to tell me that it wasn't all the way I was seeing it. And I think that was real important. As far as guests that took me aback, it's been a lot. I'm gonna have to go.
There's a lot of episodes. I don't blame you for being like,
no, man. I'm gonna have to go. I'm gonna have to go to my. Because honestly, I'm thinking once they're up and they're over, and I'm thinking about the 12 that I've got between now and ones I've got to record and research and all that stuff. If I look back, actually, two people who've actually two authors, M. Carey.
Yep.
She's the girl who fell from the sky. She fell 14,000 feet in a tandem skydiving accident without a parachute, and not only survived, but she was told you'll never walk again, and she walks. And
that's a great book,
amazing story,
and great story, yeah.
Story. And the other person who really, really blew my mind is a landmark and cornerstone Australian world surfing writer, Tim Baker, the editor of Tracks magazine for a long time. He wrote a book called Patting the Shark instead of Punching the Shark, which Mick Fanning famously did. Patting the Shark is his journey with prostate cancer, and he is now beyond the 5 years he was given to live. And to listen to the amount of empathy and compassion and acceptance that he has is absolutely transformational. And he's an extraordinary person who really gave, such incredible insights into what it means to be alive, and that we only have this moment. This moment is all. We do not know what is about to happen. And if we spend any time worrying too much about not this moment, either something that happened previously or something that's about to happen, we lose this preciousness. And his story is transformational. It's extraordinary.
It's such a great podcast, and I honestly have been just digging into it in my own free time on the side of, working and stuff, because you've got so many fantastic guests, and I love the stories that have come out of it. It's such a great, for anyone listening to our show, I'll include a link to Better Than Yesterday in the description, so you can go check it out for yourself. On a personal level as well, I loved the episode you did with Chaz Licciardello. With from The Chaser, because I was part of that generation that just grew up loving those guys, and and we had Dominic Knight in on our show earlier this year, and just talking about the stuff and the space that they've been in for the last couple of years. Absolutely so fascinating.
They and Dom Knight is, I think he was like the second or third guest I had on the show. I recorded. And I remember saying to him, and that Chaser have always been like this. I remember saying to him, mate, I just want to be a part of whatever it is you do. I want to get into that orbit. And he said, okay, man, no worries. You should do Story Club. It's run by, one of the people that writes for us, Zoe Norton-Lodge, and her, co-creator, Ben Jenkins. And you should do that. And he linked me up with Zoe. And then I started telling stories on stage. And they got me back into Story Club like 2 or 3 or 4 times. And then 2 years later was when I sat on stage and at Town Hall and in Sydney, which is a big, beautiful old room. And it was the first time I spoke publicly about being on antipsychotics. And the book came out of that. And the live tour came out of that. And so much has come out of this podcast, and so much came from that one guest, Dom Knight. Who was, referred to me by a previous guest, Will Kate. Like, it's just, who's DJ Goodwill. It's, you can't expect someone to walk down your driveway and knock on your door and say, hey, by the way, we want to give you a job. Or, hey, by the way, look, you don't know that we know about you, but we really want to hire you to do this thing you love. You do have to, not necessarily spruik yourself, but you have to back yourself, and people won't know what you can do if you don't tell them, but then you got to back it up when you get there. And I learned when I was in, I went to business school in Amsterdam, kind of halfway through the Idol adventure, because TV was as is, TV is a kind of unstable seasonal industry. I wanted to have a bit of backup. And the business school I went to in Amsterdam, they're always on serendipity. They're always on like, how are you manufacturing moments that open yourself up to serendipity and possibility? If you keep in your same routine, you'll only ever see the same people and connect with the same people, and you won't have those moments of serendipity. And so from about 2014, I have been like consciously manufacturing moments of serendipity. And I always ask my guests, once I stop rolling, I always ask them, how can I help you? What can I do for you? Is there anything I can do for you? And that question has led to more opportunities, more guests, more insight, more learning, more knowledge than anything. And I learned both of those things at business school. It was a different kind of business school. It wasn't greed is good. It wasn't that. It was a how do I put it? Like a, not say conscious capitalism. What's the word? Social.
Oh God, I can't. I'm trying
like Tom's shoes. All right.
Yeah,
Tom,
yeah.
Like you buy one, someone gets one. You know, it was that kind of business school. It was that kind of business school, which was super cool, man. I met some really amazing people there. But those are two lessons that were given to me, and like speaking with someone like Chaz, boy, man, unbelievable. And that just gave me so much confidence. Like, yeah, that's right. You fucking did. You nearly got shot for a gag. I should be more brave. Not stupid, just more brave. And, you know, moments like that, when you look people in the eye and they tell you stories like that, you're like, I should really, am I really squeezing all the juice out of this moment? Maybe not. How much further? Not in a dangerous way, but what more can I do? How can I heighten this? How can I, you know, make this as great as it possibly can be? And that's a really great lesson from Chaz. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm aware that we're running out of time, so I just want to quickly ask a little bit. It'd be remiss of me not to ask about your incredible career on television, which is absolutely insane. What serves as one of the biggest highlights of your career so far? I'm curious now. Announcing Guy as the winner of Australian Idol, which I still remember, hanging out with the Offspring on Channel V.
That was crazy.
Finding out the winner of The Masked Singer. I assume that you didn't know who it was.
Oh, I don't know who they are.
Or any of the end results on The Bachelor or Bachelorette.
I'm going to sound like such a wanker when I say, ever since I got sober in about 2010, any day that I get to go to work is the highlight of my career, because
I love it.
I was unemployed, all right, with not a lot of super, on the other side of a divorce, living in a foreign country, paying rent out of my savings, going, what do I do now? And so any day that I get to go to work is the greatest day of my career, because I just can't believe it's happening. And when I look at it like that, I just want to insulate myself from ever fighting unemployment again. And so I just try to do the best job I possibly can. I don't always get there, but I just try as hard as I can to be the most professional I can be and be the most prepared I can be and make everyone on set's day easier. So if I've done that, I've done my job right. As far as, you know, big highlights though, man, come on, that first Idol Grand Final, that was groundbreaking stuff. You know, that was a huge highlight. But it was like, I used to joke that that's the most fun I've ever had with my clothes on. It was unbelievable. And yet, a couple of years later, it was the final of the Australian Idol. We were outside and the Divinals were on stage, and we lost the satellite. We lost the power. We lost all comms. Everything went down. The entire live broadcast system stopped working. A UPS, there was an air gap at some point between a UPS and the broadcast truck. Everything went. And that 15 minutes of getting us back on air was like, no one ever saw it. 10,000 people standing in front of the Opera House did. That was like, this is the best. You know, because now we all get to find out what we're made of. Let's go. And like 110 people just went into power mode, and it was super cool because we got it back on and we reset the Divinals and we reset 60 dancers, and away we went. And it was amazing. Those moments, those are the moments that are really kind of epic, because that's when the whole team pulls together and really gets you out of the shit. And afterwards, we all just took this collective breath and went, far out. That doesn't happen every day. And we all get to say we did it. And those moments are the moments, man. Those moments are the moments.
I love it. I love that that is the one of the things that you remember the most, like that particular challenge and how much fun it was. Which, because the thought of that at the would be like, holy crap.
Well, you mentioned cricket before. What's the more satisfying catch at the end of a T20? The one straight down someone's throat into their waiting hands, or the one where they are chasing it to the boundary and they do 15 touches of the ball before they finally grab it with one hand, arm outstretched, and it's off the ground with their forearm resting on the boundary. That's the catch you want to see. That's when they go, I touched this ball 13 times and I still caught it.
You saw the effort.
I am a cricketing god, and the IPL will now hire me for $1 squillion. Like, it's when things don't go the way you think they're going to go. That's when you really find out what you're made of. And you don't want those things to happen, obviously, but all the preparation and the professionalism that I spoke about earlier, those are the things that ready you for it. And that's for me, I like to stay ready for things like that because they happen all the time.
Love it. I love it. On the subject of kind of that amazing space that is the world of television entertainment, like you've been around this space for nearly 20 years or so, good 20 years or so. Where do you see the world of television entertainment going in the next 20 years?
Oh man, I don't know. If you asked a bookstore owner in 1994, where do you see bookstores going? They'd be going, nowhere. I've been here for 50 years. This is where I'm always going to be. 4 years later, when Amazon starts, we never know what innovation is around the corner. It's not like books got worse. If anything, books got better once distribution changed. Once ebooks came along, once access to books changed, the amount the books that win, it's no longer, the gatekeepers are not as powerful as they used to be in publishing. And an indie book can be just as hard hitting and just as powerful as any kind of major publishing house, right? And you can put something out indie with great editors to make sure that you're doing a great job. That's just as powerful as anything put out by one of the the big guns. So similarly, we're in this situation now where when I started in television, unless you paid tens of millions of dollars to the government to buy a piece of the electromagnetic spectrum, which you could broadcast television signals on, and then huge investment in a television studio and staff and equipment and cameras and, abided by all these rules and regulations for that. Only then could you broadcast. And only then, if you're really, invested, could you go live. Anyone with a mobile phone and enough, data and enough reception can go live to the world from their pocket. All right. That doesn't mean that anyone is making The Wire or anyone is making Four Corners. No, the best content is the thing that will win. All right. Anyone with the money can buy a blue arch top guitar, but that doesn't make everybody Dave Grohl. The best content will win. And I see now the business models in Australia, as far as television goes, in that, like publishing, you're competing with the best in the world. Same with podcasts. People open their podcast app, and I am an indie going up against NPR. I'm going up against the BBC. I'm going up against the biggest broadcasters on the planet with offices full of producers and editors and researchers and stuff like that. So all I can do is make my podcast or my story the best, most authentic, essentially Australian angle on this situation, because that's all I've got. That's my point of difference. And then the same with television. The way that people are commissioning TV now is they're commissioning certainly scripted television in Australia. They're commissioning stuff like we're only commissioning it to get sold overseas. Because the upside of that is, yes, you can make a story about loggers in Tasmania in the early 1800s, and just put it on, a small, Australian network like the ABC or SBS? Or, how can we tell this story in a way that is uniquely Australian, but also has an international angle? And it doesn't take much. It's, it's got everything. It's got family. People overseas have family. It's got immigration. People overseas have immigration. It's got, Indigenous rights and, the kind of murky world of colonialism. A lot of that going on. All right, let's get some money from a production company overseas. Let's make it look really good, because we're going up against, the Foundation series on Apple TV, which is like the most unbelievable thing to, like, visually just bananas. But that's who you're going up against. And so the best content will win. And as Australians in television, all we can do is tell authentic Australian stories the very best way we possibly can. And that includes non-scripted. That includes, reality. That includes something like Bachelors or Masked Singer, which is super fun. That's the only thing we can do. And as long as we make it as good as we possibly can, we'll be okay. Because I definitely think it's important that we reflect the Australian culture and the Australian values in our content. And for more than keeping an industry alive, I think that is something that, needs to be protected. There's plenty of other countries that do it. France is a big example, as far as, no, that word, we don't use the English for that word. We only ever use French for that word. They defend their language quite intently, because that's their culture and that's their shared story. And that's really important for a sense of cohesion in a community. And, I think local content rules as far as broadcasting goes are still really important. I'd like to see them higher, obviously, because not only is it important to have an industry that tells our stories need to be told to give us that sense of cohesion. Otherwise, what are we? We're looking at English and American content, and it kind of roughly translates to what we've got here, but it isn't the same. It's not a similar shared value that we have. There's a lot of weird libertarian shit that comes from America that we don't like. No, we don't really do that, man. That's like, it's a bit too, I've got something and you haven't sucked in. Haha. That's not really Australia, is it? I mean, some parts it is, but generally all of us, it's not really that. But that can be the underlying message in a lot of content from overseas, but particularly America. So I think it's important that we hold on to what our collective Australian values are through making sure that we tell our stories through literature, through podcasting, through television, through film, and reflect those things that are important to us. Because ultimately, we want to see our own stories. We want to see people that we can relate to on the page or on the screen.
Absolutely. You couldn't have nailed it any better in terms of just so much interesting stuff to go on. And on the subject of that, we're now at the point of the podcast where we ask you, what have you been reading and enjoying of late?
Well, I chewed through about maybe 2 years of Asimov. I just went hard on those books that when I was a kid, I'd see, other nerdy kids at my school reading these things that look bigger than a Bible, going, oh, I'm never going to read that. Turns out I did. And I really enjoyed them. I chewed through a lot of Philip K. Dick stuff, which is just stunning.
Yeah.
I chewed through a lot of Ray Bradbury, which is terrifying, but also really, really good. Now, I know I just went on a rant about America, but I've just named 3 American writers. Other Americans. So as far as fiction goes, I can't really go for fantastical, magical stuff. I'm just not kind of into that. I like the thought experiments that happen in science fiction, because particularly near future science fiction. And there's, Black Mirror is a show that's been extraordinarily successful because it's very near future. And a lot of the Philip K. Dick stuff is very near future, or very plausible, which I really enjoy. Same with Bradbury. It was also really good. I really liked Bradbury stuff. If you haven't read The Machine Stops, that will chill you to the bone, because it's written in E.M. Forster, 1909.
Yep.
It's over 100 years old.
Wow.
It's over 100 years old. The Machine Stops by E.M. Forster is like, if you watched, did you ever see Fritz Lang's Metropolis?
Mm-hmm. Certainly did. The 1927 original,
fucking terrifying film. And so like, oh, oh, this is essentially a future-facing documentary. When you look at it now, it's terrifying to watch. Also, because it's super spooky visually.
Yeah.
The Machine Stops by E.M. Foster is, you read it and go, oh, wow, we really didn't take any notice of this warning. We're here. And this was written, are we really that predictable? Like, it's 100 and whatever, 13 years old. And it's exactly what's going on right now. And that's fascinating. As far as nonfiction, I try to read Deep Survival by Lawrence Gonzalez once every year or so, because it's a really good reminder that, like I said before, with the satellite failing on our show, not everything always goes the way you want to go. And here's some ways that you need to understand. Here's some things you need to understand about what happens to your brain when you're in a survival situation. And it's a really eye-opening book. It's not gruesome or anything like that. It's just basically who lives and who dies in survival situations and why. For example, he uses case studies. For example, there's a plane crash and, 5 people survived the crash. 5 people were alive on the ground, but only the 3-year-old walked out of the forest, because when the 3-year-old was tired, the 3-year-old sat down. When the 3-year-old was thirsty, the 3-year-old went and had a drink. The adults ran around in circles, panicking and sprinting up hills and using all their energy, and died of hypothermia. It really, and also things like go fever. And he really goes into, some cultural things that in industries that can be really deadly. Like he does this whole case study on what happened in Korean Air before Korean Air went English only in the cabin, because the deference to authority built into the language in the cabin changes the ability for people to question the captains of, are you sure you want to do that? And I had to go through some pretty heavy stuff to figure that out. Deep Survival by Lawrence Gonzalez is also the book that I read. When I first read it, I'm like, overwing exits are only 22 inches wide. That's kind of 50 centimeters. And going, there's 8 people between me and that exit that will not fit through that. Wow. Okay. And the book's like, if you see that, because he basically goes through who gets out over overwing exits. So get on the other side of those people if you can, because you're going to need to pull them through. Got it. This is a good thing to know. It's not saying I go around getting on every plane, terrified. It's like, if anything, it's like, okay, I kind of know what to do if something's going on. What else am I really into at the moment? I like the books of Jeremy Rifkin, who's kind of an economic theorist, I guess. The Third Industrial Revolution, the Zero Marginal Cost Society, 2 really, really good reads. I mentioned Hans Rosling, Factfulness, which is super duper, man, super duper. And Rutger Bregman's Humankind, which is great.
Yeah.
Yuval Noah Harari, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, is a ball terror. Get on it. That's one of the books where, occasionally I go an ebook, and that's all right. But with Yuval Noah Harari, I'm reading that with a pen. That's me underlining things and repurposing and refiguring out a paragraph, and that's me going quite slowly to kind of digest it, which is what I need to do sometimes. What else did I really like? Life and Death Decisions by Dr. Lachlan McIver. He grew up in Millamilla, which is a town kind of inland from Rockhampton. It's a kind of cattle town, probably 120 people there. And he went on to be a kind of like fringes of the world Médecins Sans Frontières doctor, working in the most dangerous parts of the Congo, and he's worked in 100 countries, war-torn, poverty, you name it. And he talks about the burden on our healthcare system when we try to rely on doctors like that. I had him on the podcast. It's such a good book. Because he talks about the things that we face as a community, and like he could have written a really quite dry, this is why we need to be afraid of antibiotic resistant bacteria, or you really got to have a look at everything else that gets caused by climate change, not just the sea rising. But he tells it in the way of a memoir, and that how 15 years ago, he's writing climate change action plans for Pacific Islands, and, seeing, what's happening on the ground at the time. And, it's a really good way to tell a story in a very different angle, rather than telling a kind of cold, grim, climate's coming for you kind of story. It's it's a good way in if you have a person in your life that you're probably going to see around Christmas that watches a little too much news after dark, is how I'll say it. That might be a way in for them because of where he comes from. He's like proper, National Party country kind of guy. Grew up in that part of the world in Queensland, and just has this real matter of fact scientific view on, and this is what we're facing, and here's some ways we can deal with it, which is really good. I could keep going, but like that's
this is amazing. I love where you're at with like all the books you're pulling from all over the place. This is like whenever I have guests on, this is the stuff I love to hear.
Right.
Just like hearing where your tastes are pushing.
Well, I'm a very curious person, and I do like to, I do like to kind of delve into and challenge myself with things that I'm reading. All We Can Save by Professor Ayana Elizabeth Johnson. She's extraordinary. That's a really good, another really good kind of look at climate change, not through the lens of it's all fucked, so give up, which was a lot of the messaging for a long time, because fear is a pretty good motivator, but it turns out it's not motivating us to do anything. But through the lens of All We Can Save, that's a really good kind of way to look at it. The way I see it. I could just keep listing books, but it's up to
I know
you.
I love it. I know that we're rapidly running out of time, but I love the fact that of all the books that you're pulling from and everything in between.
The Molecule of More.
Yeah.
More. That is who wrote it? Daniel Lieberman and Michael Long wrote a book called The Molecule of More. It's all about dopamine and how dopamine is this super, super important neurotransmitter that is inseparably involved in everything from mental illness to you picking up a glass of water and drinking it. One of the most extraordinary findings that I found in the book is there's a particular, they do this amazing research on descendants of of indigenous peoples in every country in the world, and they show there's a particular gene receptor in the brain that if it's turned on is this thing that responds to higher levels of dopamine. I'm going to get this wrong, but essentially they're showing that when humanity left Africa, when we walked out of Africa 100, 200,000 years ago, dopamine's the thing that was a difference between some people going, you know what, here we are in Spain, this is going to be just great. I think we'll stay right here. This is going to be good. And then half the tribe going, I wonder what's over that hill, and then them going. And so if you go, so people left Africa and they walked basically across Eurasia, and the Bering Strait was a land bridge at that point. So they went across the Bering Strait. And so the people who have the highest levels of this receptor are at the very, very bottom of South America, because they are the ones that went the furthest, because their brains kept going, this is great. We're stoked you guys are going to stay here. We're going to see what's over that hill. And it's this idea of how dopamine is a thing that drives us to see what else is there. And, clearly, I think if you've listened to the last hour of my conversation, you might have an idea of where my brain sits. Because I did read it. I do a lot of reading trying to figure out what the fuck's going on in my brain. Susan David's Emotional Agility, Rewire Your Anxious Brain is another really, really good one. I read a lot of books just trying to learn about what's going on in my head. Psychoeducation is extraordinarily important in dealing and living with a brain that's a bit different. But yeah, The Molecule of More is a really, really good one.
Oh, I love it. I'll add it to the pile. I love that we now have a pile that's like up to the ceiling of book recommendations from you. This makes me happy.
Here to help.
We'll finish off with some fun little quick-fire questions. No wrong answers, just a little bit of fun to finish off the show. Perfect idea of a night with a book for you?
I would say 3 Oliver Jeffers books in a row with Wolfgang, and he is snoring by 7:05 p.m.
I love it.
If you haven't read Oliver Jeffers, man, it is the business. That cat. So Oliver does this wild thing where he'll paint your portrait All right, he's this incredible children's author, but he will paint you a portrait, and you're not allowed to look at it. And then he calls you around to the front of the canvas. I think you get maybe a minute looking at it, and he pulls out a knife and he slashes it to pieces. The art that he created was the moment. It's the guy is a fucking boss, man. It's such a good. He's great. So those are the books. So I love the feeling I have inside me when I read his books, and I love that I get to. Because you read books from when I was. Oh, I used to love this book when I was a kid, and I'm like, damn, I don't know if that really aligns with kind of more kind of modern parenting research. Yeah, I think we might just get lost in the pile somewhere. So, but when you read stuff like Oliver Jeffers, you can see where he's based. He's based in like a sound, affirmation of adventure and curiosity and imagination, and also love and compassion for everyone in his community. And I love that I get to tell those stories to Wolfgang. And the picture's beautiful.
Love it. I love it. That's a great answer. Do you have a favorite word?
My favorite words are always the words that are fun to say. Wombat.
That's a good word.
Really good word to say. Really wombat.
My favorite is succulent right now.
That's a good one.
Just like the different phases of it, feelings you get from it.
Yeah, and the different presumptions of what kind of person you are depending on what you're using to describe as succulent.
Exactly, because you can some people may look at it and use it in completely a different context to the way you do.
Most words are like that.
Which famous person do you reckon would actually have an excellent voice to win The Masked Singer who hasn't been on it yet?
Lee Sales.
Really?
Former hard-hitting Prime Minister destroyer of the 7:30 report. Lee Sales has a secret career as a pianist and musical theatre person. So she kept that on the side. Like Kelly Slater's golf game is unbelievable, but you only know him as a surfer. He keeps his golf on the side. So Lee Sales keeps her musical theatre on the side. So I would love to say, take it off. Oh, fuck. It's like there's so many Walkleys in the room right now because that would be the business.
My mind is blown. Please, can we do a petition to get her on at some point? I would.
Well, that would blow the surprise.
It would. I know. Sorry, I can't say anything. That's the whole point. It's a Masked Singer. Yeah. You get asked to go on a Gogglebox as a guest reactor, and the first thing you see is you reacting to a show that you host. What's your immediate reaction?
Anything that you watch me say on Twitter while my shows are on, I don't hold back. I don't hold back. I'm all about it. I'm all about, like, it's ridiculous what I do for a living. And I think it's important to take I do it really well. And I'd like to think I get the jobs because they have options every year to either hire me or not hire me. They can hire someone else every year, every season. But they keep hiring me. And I'm guessing that's because I do a job in a particular way that they'd like to see more of. So that is my evidence that I do it well. And yeah, I think it's hilarious that, this is a thing that I do better than anybody. I think that's fucking bananas.
I love it. And on the subject of that, thoroughly describe for me the key things you need to do to say correctly, "I'm sorry, but you did not receive a rose."
It's not that hard. You simply look at this person who, depending on where you are in the series, is either feeling, "Oh man, I took 6 weeks off for this," or, "Man, I really thought there was something with her. I really loved her. I feel myself falling in love for her, and now I'm really heartbroken that she's not choosing me." You just have to look at them, and sometimes there's people weeping. Sometimes I have to call their name like 3 times because they are just so lost in this heartbreak. I've dumped a lot of people on television, so just hundreds of people. I've broken up with more people than anybody in the country. All right. I never ghost them. I tell them to their face, and it's you just need to tune into that empathy, man, because it's someone's, son, someone's daughter whose heart's hurting. And it's, it's really tough sometimes. And but it's not that hard.
It's the way you say it, like just it's always
true
big.
though, man. It's true. And sometimes these are men and women that I've come to know over like 2 months, 3 months.
Yeah.
And sometimes we're in, sometimes we're even in another country. Like, yes, you flew all the way here, and now I'm going to tell you that you are going home alone. Like, it's really hard sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. If there's one show that you'd love to be on or
Survivor.
You'd love to host, Survivor? You want to be on Survivor?
Either or.
Throw it out.
Compete, host. I've hosted one episode once. Lapali was stuck in LA when the COVID lockdown happened. No planes were landing in Australia. And it was like the Disney movie where the high school kid gets the phone call from the New York Giants and he runs on and he throws quarterback in the Super Bowl and scores the touchdown, and the kid can't believe it. I got called up off the bench to do one half of the Survivor finale reveal, and it was the most amazing night of television because I fucking loved that show, and I was so nerded out. I was so nerdy. It was great. So yeah, Survivor. Once my hip gets a bit better, not on all. I don't want to be like on Celebrity Survivor. No. If I'm going to be on it, I want it to be. I'm 48 now. Maybe in about 10 years, when people have forgotten what television was, that's when I'll show up and I'll just be this cantankerous old man who has got this super secret rig underneath the gear and just smokes everybody. That's going to be me. That or hosting it. But Lapalia, look, I would, as a vegan, sober celiac, I'm going to have to eat a lot of chickpeas to get my arms anywhere near as big as him. He is jacked, man. Big. He's a big boy.
I love it. And I'd love to see you on Survivor. That would be absolutely amazing. Just everything, just all of it.
It's the greatest television format ever created, as far as I'm concerned. I think it's the best game humans have ever come up with. And that's including AFL, basketball, curling. Because it's sometimes it's like 50, anywhere between 50 and 60 days of all the diplomacy you would need at an international climate conference, a day-long version of the hardest CrossFit class you've ever had to take, and you're camping with Bear Grylls at the Bear Grylls level of, we've got nothing, we're going to have to make it out of what we find. Like, it's that for 10 weeks. Hard to do. It's to win, you have to play like socially. You have to be so careful, because if you go too hard at the end, you're asking the people that you have decimated. You have to play so well that they just have to respect your game, and you have to leave them feeling that they weren't fucked over. That, man, he got me good there. You have to give them that feeling, because if they leave with any kind of resentment, they'll vote against you in the finale. So then you've got to pitch. You've got to pitch at the end. And I think it's the greatest game that humans have ever created. It's amazing. Amazing.
Love it. And finally, last question. What's the next show you're working on? Are we allowed any details at all?
I'll know when you know. I never get told anything. Plausible deniability is not just a thing that people say about aliens in movies. I literally don't know anything. I don't even know if I'm working next year. I'd like to think I am. I mean, I'll be doing the podcast. I'd like to think I'll be doing television. I don't know what it's going to look like. But when I know, you'll know.
I love it. And I certainly hope you are. And
Me too. So does my mortgage and my HECS debt and everything.
Amen to that. I could honestly chat to you all day, but I'm aware that we have run over time. So I'll have to finish up and simply say, Osher, it's been a pleasure having you on Tell Me What to Read. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm grateful, and I'm sorry that I gave you so much to read.
Oh, no complaints from me. No complaints from me at all. For everyone listening for this, you can check out all books mentioned right now. And it is a very long list, courtesy of Osher, from booktopia.com.au. We'll include links in the description. You can also find them at your local bookstore. You can also check out Osher's podcast, Dad Pod, and Better Than Yesterday as well. Osher, we hope to see you on our TV screens again soon. And if you enjoyed our show today, you can check out more episodes of Tell Me What to Read right now, wherever you get your podcasts. Drop us a review. Let us know what you think. Thanks for listening, and never stop reading.
Oh, good tag. Good tag, bro.
Thanks to all of our guests on today's show. Remember, all books mentioned in today's show can be found right now at booktopia.com.au. Links can be found in the description. We would also love to hear what you're reading, so feel free to join the conversation on social media. Search Booktopia on your favourite platform and join our book club. We'll catch you for our next episode, but until then, thanks for listening and never stop reading.